I would like to begin, as we always do, with our spiritual mind treatment. We are always longing for something more in our lives than we've had. We're always looking for something better. And spiritual mind treatment is a way to begin a creative process within ourselves that can take those desires for what we want, put some sense into them, make us receptive to them, and set our mind in motion in a way that lets them be so. We know that all life begins in mind, and that everything that comes into expression begins as an idea. So when we do spiritual mind treatment, we do it in order to create the ideas that we want to create the things. Let me do this treatment for you in the first person, and let me invite each of you to accept it for yourself, silently, in the first person. All right, now each one of us goes about our daily business every week, talking about ourselves, knowing ourselves in different ways, calling ourselves different things. Some of the things we call ourselves describe what we are doing. We are doctors or lawyers or Indian chiefs. Some of the things we call ourselves are rather insulting. We say, oh, wasn't that dumb? But we are always commenting upon ourselves in terms of what we are now being or what we are now doing. Let's take some time now to comment upon ourselves as we really are. Because you are greater than you appear to be, and you are something more than your occupation or your name or your relationship. And let's take time to recognize the greater beingness, the greater aspect of life and living that we are by accepting this treatment ourselves unto ourselves. I am a perfect idea in the mind of God. I am a center of divine operation. I am a channel for the endless flow of the goodness of life into the perfect expression that I call me. I was something before I came to this earth. I will continue to be something when I leave it. And throughout all of the triumphs and failures of my experience while I am here living this life, I am something more than it all and something better than it all. I am a perfect idea in the perfect mind that is God. I am a center of divine operation. I am the great thinker of the universe, thinking of itself as me. I am the creative power of the universe, making more of itself as me. I am the potential for all things good and getting greater. I am the potential for the fulfillment of every desire that I feel. I am life, wanting to live itself ever more fully. I am life, always supporting itself in that effort. There is more to me than meets the eye. There is more going for me than has ever gone before me. In the living of my life, the truth about me is that the best is yet to come. By action of this treatment, I am fully and permanently established in a larger concept of myself, my power, and my life. And because of this treatment, as I go out of here to attend to the things I do in life, I bring to all of those things and to all of my activities a consciousness that is freer, stronger, clearer, more courageous, and better able to make of my life something more and better than I have made of it before. This treatment is self-enriching, self-expanding, and life-creating, and it is in action in my life now. Accepting this, I come back now, and with perfect joy, let it be so. So it is. The title of my talk today is How to Say Goodbye. And this is something very important for every one of us to know, because death comes to all the living. It is part of life, not the end of it. And if you and I want to live well, we must know how to live well with death. We must learn how to live well with death, just as we must learn how to live well with any fact of life. Now, the longer you yourself live, the more often you are going to be called upon to say goodbye to people who are very, very important to you. And how well you are able to do this is really of very small importance to them. But it is of very great importance to you, since it is going to impact upon very heavily how you will enjoy the rest of your life. And not only will it impact upon how much you will be able to enjoy the rest of your life, but also upon how much the people you love and hope to love throughout the rest of your life will be able to enjoy you and will be able to bring joy to you. Now, beyond all that, learning how to say goodbye to those we love makes it ever so much easier to say goodbye when it comes time for you to make your exit from this plane of action. Because you know it is really not the fact of death that frightens and depresses us. It is the morbidity surrounding our thought about death. It is the morbidity that fills our minds coming out of our false beliefs about death. And the principal false belief we have about death is the belief that it is avoidable. Yes. Now, you might say, what do you mean? Nobody believes it is avoidable. Wait a minute. Nobody openly believes it is avoidable. See, we do not openly believe that, but we do openly believe other things that reveal that deep down inside us, we think there is a way to avoid it, and we are so guilty and disappointed, we're not able to find it. And when someone we love dies, this false belief manifests as the if only I syndrome. We go around saying, sometimes only to ourselves, sometimes only whispering it in the dark precincts of our mind. If only I had this, that. If only I had said this. If only I had told her that. If only I had insisted that he do this. If only I had been there more. If only I had been there earlier. If only I had been less of a worry to her. Or the big one. The big one is, if only I told him that I loved him. Or if only I told her I had loved her more than I told her that I loved her. There's no way out of this, you see. We tell ourselves, if only all this, that, or the other, and we act as if that might have made a difference. Now, what we really mean this is, it might have let that person live longer. Now, in our great grief, we commit a cardinal, if common, error. You know what we do? We confuse ourselves with God. We confuse ourselves with God. I know people that do that all life long. But in our grief, it is quite possible and quite easy to confuse ourselves with God. We confuse ourselves with the consciousness of life that indwells all the living. Now, it's important to understand that people are not born because we want them to be born. And people do not stay alive because we want them to stay alive. Every person has his own life to live. Every person has her own relationship with God. And we come and go on a timetable that is entirely beyond the control of any other living being. Now, another false belief about death that holds us forever in morbid guilt and fear is the belief that it is painful and that it is therefore punishment. First of all, there is nothing whatsoever painful about death. It's very important to know that. Death is the greatest release from pain known to mankind. All pain comes from life, not from death. See? All pain comes specifically from disease and from our efforts, however effective, to combat disease on the material level. It does not come from death or from the process of dying. Every person alive, and that includes you and me and your Aunt Tilly, every person alive can die easily and die happily. And people are doing it all time. Right? Every person alive can die easily and die happily. It is all connected with learning how to live easily and live happily, because death is part of life. And if you can manage to live that way, you most certainly will manage to die that way. No, death is not pain, and death is not punishment. It is not punishment because it comes from God. It is not punishment because it comes from God. It is life's entirely pre-planned and natural way of letting itself expand. And God or life or nature or whatever you would like to call it is never mad at anybody. Now, this is a turning point in spiritual thought, because you and I come out of backgrounds that have been teaching us forever that God is mad at people, and every once in a while does something really dreadful to show just how mad he is. And the new message of this new thought teaching is God, the power of life, is never mad at anyone. The real power of life is a creative power which is pure energy. It operates beyond anger, it operates beyond personal prejudice, and it operates beyond moral outrage. The morally outraged are the people who think they are God, not God. Right? And it comes to us as death this power of life, never to punish us, but always to fulfill its endless creative purpose by turning us into something else, something new, something more, and something better. Now, you see, our morbidity and fearfulness about death is very much connected with our morbidity and fearfulness about God. You know, our attitudes toward God are traditionally morbid and fearful. Yes, that's what Lent is all about. 40 days of dullness. That's right. Our morbidity and fearfulness about death are very closely connected with our morbidity and fearfulness about God. And it comes out of religious ideas still preached in far too many places that should have been tossed on the junk heap long, long ago. You see, our spiritual or religious pursuits should be releasing us from fear, not controlling us by fear, right? Our spiritual and religious pursuits should be teaching us that God truly is love and is never angry at anyone, and that death is not the time for some stern judgment to be passed upon us, but rather a great turning point for the better in the life of every individual. You know, if we understood death correctly and were abused of the morbid and fearful ideas about it, we would still not find it easy to say goodbye to those we love. Understand? But we could learn how to say goodbye in a way that blessed both of us anyhow. I'll say it again. With all of this understanding about the infinite rightness of death and the infinite goodness of death, if we really understood that through and through, we would still not find it easy to say goodbye to those we love. But we could learn how to say goodbye in a way that blessed both them and us. Because you know, goodbye means have a good life wherever you go. Have a good life hereafter this moment. The Spanish say it most appropriately. They say vaya con Dios, right? Which means go with God. Go with all blessings to experience your greater good. As I now go with God in my own way to experience mine. You see, goodbye means something very, very wonderful. It is much more than a perfunctory way to end a telephone conversation. Bye. It is an opportunity to give someone a parting gift. And that gift is a gift of love. The parting gift is a gift of love, which will travel with her and remind her that your desire for her, greater good, supports her wherever she goes. That's a gift. So, how to say goodbye? Well, the old-fashioned way, with love. Not with sorrow, not with fear, not with resentment for anyone or anything, but with love. Now, this does not mean that when someone you love dies, it is wrong to be sorry. That's ridiculous. It is not wrong to be anything that you are. See? And it does not mean that when somebody you love dies, you should not be fearful, or you should not be angry, or you should not be resentful, or you should not be even enraged, if you want to be, or hysterical. It doesn't mean that you should not be all of these things, that by golly, we are when that happens. You see, running from our feelings is not what leads us in the right direction. What leads us in the right direction is the ability to stand in the middle of all of our feelings, see, and know that there is something greater for us to do about it. To stand in the midst of it all, to witness ourselves going through it all, to permit ourselves to experience it all, and at the same time know there is something greater for us to do about this situation. And if we do that, we will always find within ourselves the courage to do it. And you know what courage to do? In the midst of all of it, to insist upon love. To insist upon love. Yeah. Feeling what you really feel, but knowing that behind all of that stuff, what is really so, and insisting upon it. So, how to say goodbye with love? How else? Just like when you said hello. Just like when you said hello. When you said hello with love. Why wouldn't you say goodbye in the same way? When you said hello with love. Yes, you said hello with a desire for good for that person, with a desire for good for yourself, and with a desire for good for what was to come to both of you in this relationship. That's love. a desire of good. Why now would you say goodbye with anything less than love? With anything less than a desire for good for him or her, a desire for good for yourself, and a desire for a life to come to each of you, which will mean more to each of you than the life you have had before. Now, I usually do not use really personal examples to make a point in my teaching, because I don't want to be one of those people who lapses into teaching from personality rather than principle. We have too many of them already. And I think that kind of thing is very self-serving, but I'm not sure it serves any real purpose. But today, I'm going to chance it on this subject with something very personal, because I think there are people here who are really grieving. And I know that people who are deep in their own grief are often sure that no one else in the whole world understands what they're going through. I want to let them know this is not so. I want to let them know that what they are experiencing now in their deepest heart is a very well-known quantity, and that there is an end to it, and that the end to it can be good. So, a year ago next month, my oldest friend died. Now, besides being my oldest friend, a designation he always objected, right? Besides being my oldest friend, he was a very, very special friend, because while both of us have always had other close relationships of all kinds, family, friends, the rest of it, we have always, since the very beginning, meant something quite special to each other. Something that was never really shared with anyone else. We remembered things together that nobody else knew about, and we knew things together that nobody else could know. Now, he was more than like a brother, although in many ways he was my brother. But in some ways he was also my father, and in some ways he was also my child. And sometimes he was my severest critic, believe me. And other times he was my blindest defender. Now, in truth, we were two very difficult people who for 20 years worked very hard at accommodating each other, because we sensed he had something special to give each other, and it was worth all the hard work of accommodation. So, now he developed cancer 9 months before his death. And I must tell you right here, stop your wheels from going in the wrong direction. He was not in religious science and not interested in it. He was a Roman Catholic, and that's all he wanted to be. And he was a Roman Catholic that had more severe things to say about the Catholic Church than I have ever said. Sometimes I don't know why he was a Roman Catholic, except I know he liked the dress-up part. Anyhow. Well, at first, it all looked very hopeful. He was responding spectacularly to the chemotherapy that he was getting, and for a while it looked like everything had really been cleared up. But then it reoccurred, and more chemotherapy was necessary, and this time he responded well, but not quite as well as before. But still, we thought it was working, but it didn't. And finally, they told him that there was only one more form of chemotherapy they could give him, and that it would make him terribly ill and debilitated, and that it probably wouldn't work anyway. And so we talked. He was in New York. We talked on the phone at that point. I'd been up before. And that would have been just about this time last year, maybe a week later. And he asked me if he should go ahead, take this treatment, or just let it go. And I knew that he was not asking me for advice. He was not asking me to make up his mind for him. He was asking me for love. See, he was asking me, would I love him if he did this, that, or the other? He was asking me for the kind of assurance we need to have from people we love in deciding the issues of our lives. Now, he told me he was very weak, much weaker than when I had seen him before. He told me he was very debilitated, in pain. And he told me that he was very much afraid. Not afraid of dying. He was afraid of losing his dignity. He was afraid of being humiliated by not being able to care for himself. And you know what I wanted to say to him? I wanted to say to him, nonsense. You can get well. Keep on trying. Take anything they give you. Work at it. Move down here. I'll get you well. Yeah. You never did know how to take care of yourself. Get down here where I can do it. I'll do it for you. That's what I want to say to him. But you know, that would have been so cruel. That sort of thing passes for love on the surface. That is the easy way. But it would have been so false and so selfish underneath for me to put that on him. And so I said to him, look, I really don't want you to stop being in my life. If you die, it's going to be a terrible inconvenience to me. But you know I love you, and I would do anything to keep you from losing your dignity. I would do anything from having you live in fear or pain. I would do anything, even if it means having to live the rest of my life on this planet without you. So, I don't know what you should do, but whatever you do, whether you take that treatment or leave it, I support you, and I know that your decision is the only right decision. And then he laughed and he said, I don't know why you're being so nice to me. I'm not going to leave you any of my money. And I laughed and I said, listen, you haven't got enough money to make being nice to you worthwhile. And this was a lead up to telling me that he was going to leave it all to a third friend of ours who didn't have very much money, see, and has little prospect of ever having much money. And he laughed and he said, I'm going to leave it to him for his rapidly approaching old age. And I said, that's a good idea because it is rapidly approaching. And then he said, well, I can't believe this. Don't you want anything from me? And I was going to say, no, I don't want anything from you. But I realized that he wanted to give me something. And so I said, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. I want those 2 Indian head prints that are in your living room. I said, when I first went into your home 20 years ago, I saw them on the wall and was so angry that I didn't have enough taste to pick out things like that for myself. So you can heal this ancient envy I have been secretly carrying all these years by letting me have them. And he did, and they hang in my home today. Now, what I did not know was that with that phone conversation, I was saying goodbye because I never got a chance to speak to him again. A couple of weeks later, I got word he had been taken to the hospital. I was out at a Sillamar at the time trying to make some sense out of chairing the RSI Congress out there. In the middle of that, I got word. And I got to a phone as soon as I could, and I called the hospital in New York City. All I got was a private duty nurse, very cool and impersonal, who didn't know me and couldn't talk to me. And what's worse, who didn't really know him. And I started to be very sad until I realized, I got into the if only I had this. Until I realized that I had said that last goodbye the way it needed to be said. And that if I had a million more chances, I could never say it better. As a matter of fact, if I had any more chances, I may not do it quite as well. If I had a million chances, I couldn't say it any better because I had said it with love. You know, the greatest test of love is the ability to give it freely, which means to let the one you love go free and take your love with him. No matter how you feel, no matter what you fear, no matter how you're going to be inconvenienced, no matter how you would rather have it. The great gift of love is to give that freedom anyhow. You know, we're always going around saying, I love you so much I would give you anything. This is the time to do that. And the thing we must give, if we are going to express the love we claim, is freedom. And you know, there's a big payoff to that, because love is the only power in life. And when you give it freely, you are setting it loose in your experience. And in time, it will come back to you. And it will come back to you in a way that heals your feelings, that dissolves your fears, and that gives you the more and the better that you were afraid of losing. Yes, you say goodbye with love, just as you said hello with love. When you said hello, it was with love, see? Because it was with the desire for something good to happen to both of you. And that's what love is, the desire for something good. So, how else could you say goodbye but with love? However, when we say goodbye, it is with a greater love than when we said hello. Because by now it is a love that is tried and true. It is a love which is by now strong enough to give love's greatest gift, freedom. When we say hello, we don't give love's greatest gift, freedom. You know what we give? Imprisonment. I always do, all right? But when we say goodbye, if there has been any growth in love, it must be a growth that allows us to give love's greatest freedom. Freedom to them and freedom to ourselves. And as we give those we love that freedom, we get it back as freedom from the fear of life without them, because that's our problem. Freedom from the fear of life without them. Freedom from guilt over what we did not do or should have done. And freedom to pass out of our natural grief into our natural inheritance in this relationship, which is more love than we ever had or were capable of before. Now, you know, we have to stop and realize that we do not come together in this life to force life to continue, but to love life as it continues, okay? We come together to give love when we say hello, to give love as we go along together, and to give love when we say goodbye. And if we let the bond of love between us grow through it all, the time will come when we will get the chance to say hello to those we love again. And when that time comes, we will be glad to. So that is how we say goodbye. And so ends our lesson. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.